Owning the real estate was always a priority for me. Some of the very successful business entrepreneurs around town, everybody owned commercial real estate. That was always my end goal. And so most of the real estate that I acquired early was owner occupied. There was no grand plan of a big commercial real estate portfolio. It was to own the real estate that the car washes sat on, and eventually either lease them out to the business side out to someone, or sell the business. And eventually that's what I ended up doing, was selling the business part and kept the real estate. The most painful lesson, probably did a very poor, sloppy job of underwriting Kentstone.
What did the sloppy underwriting cost you?
So I went 370 over, so what, a couple $100,000.
This episode of the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast is brought to you by my CRE Accelerator Mastermind, where you'll get access to my step-by-step investment blueprint, essentially a library of resources on how to invest in commercial real estate. You'll get connected to a supportive community of other commercial real estate investors that are doing projects just like you. You'll get personalized coaching and feedback from me every step of the way. Go to www.crecentral.com to learn more. We're down here in Alabaster, Alabama for the inaugural episode of Lessons Learned with none other than Marcus Kittrell. Marcus is founder of Marc-1 Car Washes. He is a partner at Mammoth Holdings. He was the former president of the International Car Wash Association, and he is a member of the Inner Circle in my CRE Accelerator Mastermind. And today, we're going to sit down with him and learn the lessons learned directly from the man himself after investing in commercial real estate for over 40 years. Marcus, you bought your first car wash in the 1980s. I mean,
Built it.
You built your first car wash in the 1980s.
With my father's help, yep.
Way ahead of the trend, right? Because now car washes are very trendy. The last 10 years they have, but you got into this very early on. How did you get into the car wash industry, and what made you want to start building and growing your own portfolio of those assets?
When I was 16, I went and got a job. I needed a job, part-time job at a full-service car wash up here in Birmingham. And so that's kind of how I started. And then a few years later, my dad had a piece of property that he was going to lease to a guy that was going to build a self-service car wash on. And something fell through on that, and he asked me would I be interested in doing it. And of course, I jumped at it because I was already in the full-service business working. And so, in 1985, we started the project and opened up in, I think, May of 86. And it was a little 6-bay self-serve car wash that I still have today. And so that kind of started the journey. And, as time went on, I would buy another one, fix them up, sell them, and do things like that. So I think at one time I was up to maybe 6 or 7 of those type of washes. And then in 95, and at that time I was still working at the full service car wash that a friend of mine got me the job.
So you're still working full time?
Absolutely.
While starting your own car wash?
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And to me, that was probably the best thing that I ever did, was stay working, because you just kept learning more and more about the business. I mean, I'm 20. At that time when I built it, I think I was 21 or 22. So you're talking about very young, in business. So having a guy that I worked for kind of as a mentor too helped tremendously. Even though it was 2 separate businesses, he had a full service car wash and I'm building a self-service car wash. So, different nuts and bolts.
Not competitors.
And so I'm having to learn as I go.
But that's got to make the bank feel good, right? About working with you on these car washes, because you're still working in the industry. It's got to make you feel good, right? Because you've got cash flow coming through. I mean, I know that's a lot to balance, but at least you have cash coming in while you're getting these up and off the ground.
I mean, I would work during the day and then go take care of my car washes at night, and it was 7 days a week. I mean, that's just how you did it. That's how we did it back then. And so, did that, stayed working until 2000. But in 1995, I went to work for a company called Universal Car Wash Systems, and they actually installed car washes, serviced them. So I got a whole nother 5 years of learning the mechanics in and out of the business. And then in 2000, I went to visit a friend of mine in the industry that had started this express concept. And so, it was something that I said, you know what, I think this is the avenue I want to pursue. I love the self-serve, but it's not a growing segment of the industry. And so I wanted to stay into the conveyor type of business. And so I was able to go over there, kind of pick up what they were doing, rebrand it for what I wanted to do here in Birmingham. So in 2002, started the Marc-1 Express concept. We were the third in the country to do so, and so from there it really took off. The express style. That's why you see so many express tunnels now. That's what we call them in our industry is the express model.
Yeah, they're everywhere now, and it's brilliant, right? Because everybody's added the subscription model to it, which
That's what brought the private equity in.
Right.
Is when you could somewhat determine your revenue per month, and you wasn't dependent so much on weather. That changed the game in our industry. Before then, if you owned a full service car wash, you would say, okay, I'm going to own the real estate. I'm eventually going to sell it to either pass it on to my kids, or we're going to end up, selling the business and leasing it out. That was kind of maybe the concept back then. Completely changed when private equity came in.
Yeah, they've totally changed the game, and we're definitely going to be diving into that today because you had your own private equity venture that you're still working on. But before we get to that, I mean, when you're talking about getting these car washes started, like owning the commercial real estate seems very natural and normal to you. Whereas today, a lot of these operators seem to be doing absolute net or triple net ground leases where they're coming in and then they're selling off the real estate. For you, why was it so important, or why did you decide to buy the property with the car washes? Was that even a thought that crossed your mind?
Owning the real estate was always a priority for me. And so, I think it's just seeing some of the very successful business entrepreneurs around town that everybody owned commercial real estate. And so that was always my end goal. And I think it was in '94, I did an S corp for the business. And I want to say '96 or '97, we had our first LLC to own the real estate. So we first everything was in the S corp, then we moved it out, the real estate out portion to the LLC, and just started that process. And so most of the real estate that I acquired early was owner occupied. That's how so there was no grand plan of a big commercial real estate portfolio. It was to own the real estate that the car washes sat on, and eventually, either lease them out to the business side out to someone, or sell the business. And eventually, that's what I ended up doing, was selling the business part and kept the real estate.
Yeah, it's a great way to get it started in commercial real estate. And there's a lot of accidental commercial real estate investors.
Yeah,
right. Because you start off with a business. You buy the building that your business operates out of, and then you outgrow that building, so you buy another one, and you keep the process going. And I do the same thing. I mean, every now and then I'll go and buy another building for one of my entities, simply to take advantage of the better terms you can get from financing, and also you're going to have your business pay to be somewhere. You might as well be the landlord collecting that rent.
You're the landlord, and so you're responsible for paying yourself. And they always said, pay yourself first. I think that's something I've always heard. So
that's right. Profit first.
Yeah. And so, that's something that we kind of followed, and, fortunate that we're able to do it that way. And, it's been a really good run.
Yeah. So you've grown to a portfolio of 17 properties today. Talk to us about the journey from 1986 with your first location to Mammoth Holdings, your private equity venture.
Yeah, there were a lot of steps between then and 2018 when we did Mammoth Holdings. But yeah, it was really one property at a time. Every other year, I think kind of what we were on the pace on. And so I would, buy the real estate early, a year or two early, get the funds up to build the building, and so did that for 15, 16 years. And then in 2017, a friend of mine came to me that's an investment banker and said, listen, why don't you consider joining forces with me and my partner on a kind of a private equity deal? And I knew nothing about private equity back then. And so, but I knew I was getting to the point in life, I was 54, 55 years old, said, listen, I got to start making decisions kind of long term. And I knew back then that real estate was going to be what I wanted to do. So I started kind of positioning myself to do that. And then, in 2018, we pulled the trigger on private equity that called Mammoth Holdings. We partnered in with Red Dog Equity out of Atlanta, and been great partners. Private equity is it's great sometimes, and it's bad sometimes. There's the ups and downs to it, and so you don't always agree with the private equity side of the business, but you learn to work with it. And I think at the end of the day, they want to do what's best for your people and the company. So that's the way I've experienced it so far.
Yeah, it's got to be interesting going from taking the reins for 30 years,
Yeah.
and then handing it off to somebody else.
Yeah, this marks my 45th year in the car wash industry. Started in 1981 when I was a sophomore in high school. And the transformation from 1981 to now is unbelievable for our industry. I'm really proud of our industry, and I was able to serve as International Car Wash President in 2024 and serving as past president now, and really seeing our industry grow tremendously in all aspects. But saw a lot of great advances when the private equity came on board, because they brought resources and experience and outside thinking that we just didn't have back then. We were just car wash guys.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting how quickly that can change an industry, because I mean, I'm sure everybody has noticed this, but within the last 5 to 7 years, I mean, it really seems, especially since COVID, tunnels are everywhere.
Yeah, and we were able to kind of stay open during the COVID year of being essential, and so people would just kind of wash their car, stay in there. Windows would stay up. They could buy their club or membership online, and so we wouldn't have no interaction, which was kind of weird, but. People, it was back then, it was just a different deal back then. And so you wanted to respect everybody's position on it. And so, but we washed a lot of cars, and we had to close our vacuum area. So, I mean, you're talking about efficiency. We were about the most efficient business out there. You just roll through the car wash, one after another, and everything is subscription. So you're getting paid online. And so you didn't have to work a whole lot. It was actually pretty good.
Yeah. Make sure the gate's open. Make sure the soap's full,
and just let
people do their thing.
Let it rock and roll. And we had a good year. Unfortunately, it was a tough year for a lot of people, and definitely realized that. But a lot of businesses unfortunately didn't make it through COVID, and so that's really sad to see. Being a small business guy myself, you wish the best for everybody.
Well, it's a testament to what the industry is doing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's nice. You never know until a black swan event like that happens, how resilient you can be. But car wash is pretty resilient.
Pretty resilient. Even our little self-serve models, I still have 4 of those today that my son has. And so even those were pretty steady. Even those were kind of your do-it-yourself washes. We were able to kind of work through it, and it just kind of worked out. But like I said, I love the industry and love the business part of it, and so it's really allowed me to move more into more commercial real estate, which I definitely enjoy.
Yeah, it's a fun game. I mean, you don't get to a portfolio of 17 properties by accident, right? It takes a lot of work and a lot of strong relationships. Yeah. And I know that for you, building those relationships with lenders has been invaluable. And I think that's something that a lot of investors take for granted. They look at lenders as a necessity or a necessary evil that they would prefer not to deal with, but have to because they have the money.
Right.
You took a completely different approach, and it helped you scale a lot faster than I think most people ever could without those relationships. Can you kind of tell us about your banking partners and how you really treated them like partners?
Yeah, we used a small bank, and this I can remember walking in his office in '94, I believe it was '94 or '95, and I was applying for the loan for another self-serve car wash. And it was him and his dad and his uncle, and those were that was the loan committee back then. And he goes, Marcus, I don't know. Let me talk to my dad and my uncle, and I'll get back with you tomorrow. And we didn't know each other. I just had met him, And so I thought, well, great, I'm not going to hear back from this guy. And he calls me back, and he goes, yeah, man, let's go with it. Let's give you a run, see how you do. And it's been great. But it is relationship to me. I value their relationship. I've watched their business grow. They had one bank back then. I think they've got 6 or 7 now. So they've grown. They got their separate mortgage company, and they're growing. They're one of the best banks in Shelby County. Just got voted best bank in Shelby County. And so they're a relationship bank. And so I think it's very important to start those relationships early and embrace those because they're important. You got to have them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the takeaway I have there is if you get Marcus Kittrell to bank with you, you can 6 to 7x your bank over the next couple of decades.
I haven't thought about it that way, but I will.
I mean, hey,
I will pass that
causation,
along.
correlation, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm sure. I'm thinking I was a small part of that, but they would have been just fine without Marcus. They just the way they are. They do a great job.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Well, Marcus, talk to us now because post private equity, which I mean you're still in, but since you've largely sold and combined with them, you're now starting to focus more on your commercial real estate portfolio, and you're starting to diversify into a wide variety of assets. So tell us what you're interested in today and kind of what your portfolio looks like.
Tyler, I think what I am doing, I've kind of watched you do, to be honest with you. You're really big on the not being in just one asset class. And so I've kind of taken that to heart and said, okay, I like the retail, I like the office, I like the office warehouse, the triple net stuff. And so, I think you can be good at all of it. And I think it's, I think I heard you on a podcast before, you just kind of, spread your eggs out a little bit more and not be so reliant on one industry. Because we've seen, just in my, few short years in commercial, I've seen, multifamily, spike and go down. I've never had an interest in residential. A lot of because I hear you talk about your non-interest in residential. I say, well, we'll scratch that off the list. If Tyler don't want to do it, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so, but I love all that. I love all asset classes when it comes to that. As long as it's commercial real estate, I'll take a look at anything.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways to diversify in commercial real estate, and you're tending to follow kind of my same model, which is pick an area, pick a neighborhood.
Yep.
It seems like Pelham and Alabama, or really where
Shelby County,
Pelham and Alabaster.
Yep.
Shelby County
Yep.
is really kind of where you're focused, which allows you to get to know the area really well. So you can then decide, okay, well, yeah, actually, this hotel would be a good investment, or this shopping center would be a good investment.
Yeah, it's not just knowing the area; it's also knowing the people and the brokers in the area, knowing the mayors, the city engineers, and so when they see you do a nice project, when you bring another one to them, they know you're going to do it right, and so you might not have to jump through as many hoops; you still have to jump through a lot of hoops. But I think your reputation is everything in commercial real estate, whether it be with the broker, whether it be with your bank. We use a third party for just about everything when it comes to like AC maintenance, HVAC maintenance, plumbers, electricians. So I third party all that out. And it's important to have people that know you and rely on you for work, but also I can rely on them to get the job done for our tenants. And so that's important. But the relationship side of it is everything. I've just carried that through the car wash. I look at everybody as a customer, even if they're a vendor of ours. I look at them as a customer.
Yeah, you're incredible with that. It really shines through. And I think that focusing on relationships first opens up more doors than probably anything else that you could ever do.
Yeah, I always tell people, to be unclear is to be unkind. And I use that phrase all the time. And I have to remind myself. I think if you're very clear with your vendors and your tenants, your broker, your banker, it just makes things a lot simpler. And I think, and they kind of appreciate that type of approach because to be unclear, to be unkind, a lot of those are tough conversations with people. I mean, it's just reality. Say, listen, this work's got to get done, or, Marcus, I've got a leak in my roof. We need to get that fixed. And so, you're relying on your relationships to get stuff done. And so, Relationships are everything to me.
What are you most proud of out of your commercial real estate ventures over the last 40 years?
Probably the relationship sides. Really, I mean, I want my tenants to be very successful, and to date, we have not lost any tenants. So
Tell us more about that, because you don't just say, like, you do actually go above and beyond for your tenants, and that helps keep vacancy
yeah,
low.
we've there are some tenants that maybe moved to an area they wanted to be in. Like I think we've maybe two or three, but every tenant that we have signed or re-signed have stayed. And so I believe it's a partnership. I look at a tenant landlord as a partnership, not the typical type of tenant landlord relationship. I understand small business. I want them to be very successful, and I think I'll play a part in them being successful. And so, we were having a conversation earlier about, HVAC maintenance. And, when I started doing, I guess, buying the commercial buildings, before I was the landlord, so I was responsible for everything. And I just thought that was kind of the way it should be. And, I was the owner occupied landlord. And so I was asking my broker, I said, well, then what's the typical arrangement with that? How does that work? And he said, normally the tenant is responsible for everything. I said, gosh, that doesn't feel right to me on things. And so how can I make it work where, you know, where I can help participate with that? And he says, well, let's bump up the per square foot price, because I'm probably higher than the market just about with every property. But I take care of our tenants. And so if there's a HVAC issue, then, I have an HVAC guy that will go in, and take care of them. And I don't have to worry about them being ripped off by someone that they had called just out from a number. And so, I can kind of control that process. And so, to me, it's the relationships that I've built over the years with my tenants and, my bank and everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it matters maintaining a relationship and really a reputation like that, right? Because the small business community is pretty small.
Yep.
And it doesn't take too many businesses saying, hey, don't rent from this guy, to start causing you problems. I mean, I see it all the time in East Nashville. There are certain landlords that even the businesses know, don't go deal with them.
Well, there was a property. I'll give you an example of that. There was a property that we own. We had just bought it back in July, and it's about 3,000 square feet that we were trying to find a tenant for. And the tenant at one of the tenants at Kent Stone, mom referred a business to go there because they were moving. And so that came from a tenant we have. His mom referred a tenant to come to us, and we signed them a couple months ago, and now they're in. But I had nothing to do with that. But the mom of the guy that rents from us had a relationship with a lady that needed to move and needed a little bit more space. And it literally, I got a phone call, and I turned over to my broker. I let him make the commission on it, and said, listen, man, this is an easy one I just served up to you, because I want to take care of them too, because it allows me to get first phone calls when things are, come to market or before they come on market. I always, get the first phone call.
What was your biggest mistake? And what were the lessons that you learned from that?
The most painful lesson in the commercial real estate side of it, probably did a very poor, sloppy job of underwriting Kent Stone. I got with you kind of on that process, and you talked about underwriting, and I said, listen, I know what I'm doing. I know how to do this. I've built car washes. I can manage this, and that was a mistake. I should have done more of the underwriting. I think we would have been closer to budget. Even though it was a post-COVID and it was an expensive build, I look back now and say, gosh, man, we could have done a better job there. And it just being sloppy.
What did the sloppy underwriting cost you?
I would say probably, I always allow a 10% to go over. So $1 million, $1,000,001, $1,150,000. So I went 370 over. So what, a couple $100,000? And so that was because the numbers are good at Kentstone, and I'm very proud of that project. That was my first new construction of a non-car wash property. And so, and that, I said, this is going to be a really nice project. And, you look at the numbers, they're good, but they could be better. And so that was probably my biggest takeaway.
I mean, kudos to you though, because even at $370,000 over budget, you're still at a 7% cash on cash return.
Yeah, and if you look at the effective return, I think we're about 17 or 18%.
Right.
For the first year depreciation, and that's things I've learned really, Tyler, with being with your group, is that I heard about that stuff, and my CPA was really good at taking care of that stuff. But now I'm learning it, and so I can understand better the results of the depreciation, and I understood in the car wash business for equipment, but when it comes to commercial real estate, it's a little bit different. I mean, you don't. There's some things you can get a first year write off on, but I was used to, first year depreciation of $1 million on car wash equipment. That solves a lot of problems.
Yeah, it solves every problem.
Yeah, I think we had 148,000 the first year or something like that for Kentstone. So, you just learn it's different.
That's like half a car wash bay.
Yeah. So you're going, wow, is that it? Is that all I got for the first year? But then it really adds up. If you look at cash on cash returns, I never really thought about returns like that because I've always did my properties to hold. And so, I said, well, I can make mistakes here and there, but that's not good thinking. You've got to be smarter than that. And so that's what I'm trying to get better at.
Yeah. Marcus, there's so much throughout your career and your life that I find unbelievably admirable. And one of the most interesting things that I think you're working on now is setting up your family for the next step.
Yep.
Right. And, you're bringing Buddy in.
Yep.
And you're showing him kind of how the business works and what the portfolio looks like. I mean, whatever you're comfortable sharing around that, can you kind of tell us about how you're bringing your kids into it? Because so many investors get into commercial real estate for the generational side of what they could build, but they don't get to hear what that actually looks like. So can you tell us kind of what y'all are doing?
Yeah. Buddy worked for me at the car wash when he was a kid. I mean, he's been around car washing all his life. And I went to him before I did the private. He was a freshman in college at University of Alabama. And I went to him, I said, listen, I'm thinking about selling the business and doing the commercial real estate. And I thought he would be really maybe upset or disappointed. And he almost said, thank goodness, because he saw the work it takes to run these things. And he goes, Dad, I want you to do what you want to do. And if, I'm probably going to take a different path. And so once he graduated college, I think he could see that, listen, there's nothing wrong with coming back to the kind of the family business and learning the car wash industry. And so he did, and he still works for Mammoth Holdings now, as one of the maintenance techs. And that's kind of how I learn. I mean, you got to learn the bones of the business. And so he's been transitioned this past year or so in the commercial real estate side. We came up to your first event. He loved it. And so, I think it's important. I never want my kids to be surprised at what we have or what we don't have. I'm very transparent when it comes to that. So we do what we call a family board meeting every year. That has my attorney, my accountant, my wife, my two kids, my assistant, and I think my mom came to the first one. But I lay out, it's a board meeting, and we lay out everything. I mean, with what debt we have, what payments are, what assets we have, what insurance we have. I'm just very transparent when it comes to that, because I think your kids need to know this stuff so they're not surprised if something were to happen. They kind of know the plan and they know what steps start to take. And some kids react to it differently, but I think if they're exposed to it early on, they have a greater, more respect for what you're trying to do. And, when you say, hey, we're trying to do this, we need to be patient here, not spin here and do this, they understand what you're trying to do. And so, but you know, the family board meeting is kind of where I started this about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's been very vital. You know, as a matter of fact, Buddy, this last time he goes, Dad, I'm so glad we do this every year, because I see the company growing, but I also understand more and more of what we are trying to do. And he said we are trying to do in the future. And so, to me, that's what you want to hear. You know, not what you want to do; it's what we want to do. And so, I think that's important.
I think that's really neat. I mean, the way that you've set it up and the fact that, you know, I mean, they're in their 20s, right? And
Yeah,
they're
he's
getting,
27. Yep.
yeah, they're getting this exposure to seeing how that's properly done. I mean, most first generation that builds the wealth, most of that first generation shelters the second generation too much. They want the attorneys to handle it or whatever. And so by the time that second generation has the responsibility for managing the wealth or the properties or whatever has been accumulated, they don't know anything.
No, and that's another part of the board meeting, because the attorney's there and they have tough conversations with the kids. You know, my daughter, she's 22, that gave us our first grandson, and so she'll be more involved in the business as we go. Once my grandson gets a little bit older, but right now her first responsibility is raising our grandson.
That's right.
But she's in the meeting too, and she's right there, and she understands it. Or she doesn't understand everything, but she's at least hearing what's going on. And so, but I think it's just super important that my attorney talks to them, that my accountant talks to them, like adults. And so, listen, this is real world stuff. This is not, you know, this is not a case study. This is reality, and this is how, you know, business needs to be done. And so, it's not a family get together. It's actually a family board meeting with an agenda we go through, and my attorney's the one that leads it. And so we kind of go. It takes about 2.5 hours to get through it. So
that's great. Knowing what you know now, I mean, 40 years of investing in commercial real estate. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing back in 1986, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. You know, to be unclear is to be unkind. And I think if I'd have had better communications back then, I think I could have done better in business all around, and relationships. I mean, so if I could go back in time, I would learn how to be a better communicator and have the tough conversations early on. I've lost a lot of good employees over the years, just because of not communicating well. And so I stress that to everyone I come across. And, you know, brand yourself, but learn how to be a really good communicator. And that takes a lot of listening too. You have to listen to what people are trying to tell you. And so, but you know, that would be my biggest takeaway is to be a better communicator.
Yeah. Marcus, thanks for sitting down for lessons learned. If anybody listening wants to learn more about Mammoth Holdings and what y'all are doing there, or just follow you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm pretty simple. I do have a Facebook. I do have an Instagram. It's Marcus Kittrell. But email at marcus.k@mammothholdings.com or marcus@kittrelldevelopment.com. And so can be reached at those, and be glad to speak with anyone about anything. You know, to be honest with you, Tyler, if I didn't have the people that helped me, there's no way in the world I would be sitting in this chair being able to do what I'm doing now. Yeah. So I think it's important to you know, share information, and be available. I think it's important.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, that's why I started the mastermind.
Yeah,
you know?
That's the best thing that I joined, because it's helped me focus. You really have you know, coined some questions that have helped me think longer term about different properties, and you know learn, hey, there's always a deal out there. You know,
there's no shortage.
So you know, you can pass this one up if it doesn't quite fit everything. And so I think that's important. I think that's very important to say there's always a deal out there. You just have to hunt for it and learn to underwrite better.
So hey, we could always polish up on our underwriting.
Yeah. Well, I think you've done a really good job of it. And so that's one reason I joined your syndication too. I said, you know, I'll let Tyler do the properties that he wants to buy and sell, then I'll jump in that. The stuff that I'm gonna hold long term, I'll do that.
That's right.
So
never a bad choice.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for doing this.